Here's the third edition of the board game Dungeon by TSR, made in 1981. I always had a blast playing this game, and it's more fun the more people you play with. An interesting thing you may not know is that TSR also made a computer version of the game back in 1982 for the Apple II computer. It plays almost exactly like my board game. The computer game shows portions of the game board depending on where your character is. The computer game also replicates the combat sequence, but provides some animations in some instances. In this video, I'm going to show the similarities and differences between the board game and the computer game. The rules for both are pretty much the same, so let me start by talking about the rules, and I'll first use the board game as a guide. Here's the full view of the game board. The players start in the middle, and then they venture out into different levels of the dungeon to kill monsters and collect treasure. Once they have the designated amount of treasure, then they have to be the first to return to start. Level 1 has the easiest monsters and smallest treasures. Up to 8 players can play. There are 4 player types, so only 2 of each type can be used in a game. For example, 2 elves, 2 heroes, 2 superheroes, and 2 wizards. So if you're playing with, let's say, 6 people, you can't have 3 of them be wizards. There's a strict limit of 2 for each player type. Now, each of these player types have their own pros and cons. First is the elf. This is the weakest character, so in order to survive, the elf should only explore levels 1, 2, and 3 in the dungeon. This doesn't mean that the elf can't go deeper, but it is very difficult to survive in deeper levels as an elf. Therefore, the elf only needs to collect the equivalent of 10,000 gold to win. The elf is the best at locating secret doors, finding them on a roll of 1 to 4 on a 6-sided die. Also, the elf can wield a magic sword if found. The hero is a bit stronger than the elf, so you can see how they can also explore level 4 to defeat harder monsters and get better treasures. However, they have less chance of finding secret doors, as you can see. The superhero is much stronger, so they are recommended to visit levels 3, 4, and 5 for the tougher monsters and better treasure. The superhero needs 20,000 gold to win, and can use a magic sword if found. Finally, we have the wizard. The player type is one of the strongest, and so the wizard should visit levels 4, 5, and 6 to get the best treasures. But the monsters there can be tough. The wizard needs treasures worth 30,000 gold to win the game. One negative aspect of the wizard is they cannot use a magic sword if found. Instead of magic swords, the wizard gets spells. In the board game, the wizard gets between 7 to 12 spells to use during the game. This is determined by a die roll and adding 6. However, in the computer game, the wizard automatically starts out with the full amount of 12 spells. The player can determine which combination of spells the wizard will have, so you can pick 5 fireballs, 5 lightning bolts, and 2 teleports. It's up to you. In the board game, you can replenish your spells when you go back to start. In the computer game, you cannot replenish your spells at all, unless you die and have to start completely over. Here's the beginning of the computer game where you pick characters. You have to first create a name, then you pick a player type. Notice it limits you to 2 per player type. For this game, I will create 4 players, 1 of each player type. Notice the wizard gets to pick 12 spells. Here's the map of level 1 on the computer. So you're not seeing the entire game board, just a portion of it. That's kind of a disadvantage, especially if your goal is to head to a specific level of the dungeon and you're not sure where it is. Now, if you bought the physical copy of the computer game, it came with a small map of the entire dungeon, so this is helpful for planning purposes. Here we get to move 5 squares, so there is no dice involved with movement. There is a secret door on the white above me, but if I try to go up and search for it, my turn will end, so I'm just going to continue down for now. My movement ends with a beep, so I'll have to wait until the next turn until I can enter the room. Now, let me just switch back to the board game so we can compare. So you can see the green piece, my elf, is just outside the door. Now the hero, the blue piece, gets to move 5 squares. I made it into a room. At this point I have to look for a level 1 monster card and treasure card. All the different levels have different cards. We can see that I have to fight a hobgoblin, and the hero has to roll a 5 or higher. I rolled a 7, so I defeat the hobgoblin and get the treasure. Typical treasure in level 1 is a sack of gold, but you can get a special treasure such as a secret door card, which allows you to move through any secret doors as if it were a regular door. Also, once you empty a room of its monster and treasure, you have to put down an RIP token. That way no one else can get anything from that room. Alright, let's switch back to the computer game. This is what the same thing with the hero looks like on the computer. Move 5. Enter the room. It switches to high resolution graphics. Here's a hobgoblin. I need to roll a 5 or higher to kill it. I roll a 7 and killed it. I found a map of secret doors. Okay, back on the map, instead of an RIP card, the computer just colors in the room with a yellow color which matches the hallway. Now what happens if you are in a battle and you miss? Here's an example. My wizard encounters a vampire. So the wizard needs to roll a 9, but he rolls a 2. So now the vampire gets to attack. My wizard is lightly wounded, drops a treasure, loses a turn, and must retreat a space. This is where it could get interesting, because if another character is nearby, he can zip into that room, potentially kill the vampire, and collect not only the vampire's treasure, but also a treasure that the wizard dropped. In case you're wondering what the monster attacks look like, here's a chart from the board game instructions. Rolling a 7 or 11 means the monster misses. The snake eyes means the character is killed, loses treasures, and returns to start. Most of these are the same on the computer, except if you're seriously wounded, you only lose half of your treasures and return to start on the computer. But remember, whatever treasures you leave behind, another character can potentially go to that space and get them. I do want to mention these bigger rooms, which the game calls chambers. These have monsters but no treasures. So in order to pass through them, you have to fight a monster for no reward. In the computer game, every time you go through a chamber, you have to fight a monster, even if you've been through it before. In the board game, this is capped after 3 monsters have been encountered in a chamber. Now there are monster cards that are not really monster cards at all. The first one is a cage, which traps you for 1 to 6 turns, but you still get a treasure out of the deal. Another one of these monster cards that is not really a monster is a slide. This slides you down to a chamber in a lower level. Then you're forced to fight the monster in that more challenging level, and since it's in a chamber, you get no treasure. Let's talk special treasures that can be found in regular rooms. Here's a magic sword, and here's the card from the board game for comparison. It's either +1 or +2, depending on the roll of the dice when found. It gives you an additional number to add to your roll when you fight monsters. Here's an ESP medallion. I think there are only 2 of these in the whole game. It enables you to check the monster card ahead of time, so you can decide if you want to fight or leave. For example, here my superhero sees that there is an evil superhero in the room. At this point, he is given the option to enter the room to fight, or he can leave and avoid combat. Here's the crystal ball. There is only 1 of these in the whole game. You can look into any room and view the monster and treasure there. For example, I've got my wizard down here, and I'm going to press C to use my crystal ball. There's this flashing white square in the upper left room, and if I press the space bar, I can move it from room to room. Once I find a room that I want to look into, I press the return key, and in this case it tells me there is a red dragon there with a huge ruby worth 8,000 gold pieces. So at this point, I can decide if I want to head over to that room or not. First, I'm going to press the T key to check my treasures. As you can see, right now I have 22,000 gold. So if I get that huge ruby, I'll just make it to 30,000 gold, which is what I need to win the game. So let's head over there. The red dragon is the hardest monster in the game. The elf and the hero couldn't even kill it unless they had at least a +1 sword. If I don't win here, I'll have to remember to use a lightning spell. Okay, I rolled a 6, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. I'm stunned and lose a treasure. Let me skip ahead to my next turn. Since this is my second attack, it reminds me of the monster in my options. I'll use a lightning spell here. Rolled a 5, missed again. I'm stunned and lose another treasure. I'll skip ahead again. Lightning spell again. I rolled a 9, finally defeated it. I get that treasure that I dropped, plus I get the huge ruby. So when I inventory my treasure later on, you can see I made it to 30,000 gold. However, I haven't won yet. I have to make it back to start, which is through that big chamber and then out to the left of the screen. Here's an evil wizard. Luckily, it's best to attack without spells. But I rolled a 3, and the evil wizard killed me. I drop all my treasure and go back to start. Okay, let me switch to the game board. The wizard is the white piece, and he just got killed in the chamber of the king's library. So to indicate what monster and treasure is still in the room, I put a number token on it. The specific number doesn't really matter. Then off to the side, I place the matching number token, and then next to that I put the monster card and the treasure cards that it is now guarding. The nice thing about the computer game is that the computer will keep track of this for you. So back on the board, I put the wizard piece back at start. Now it's going to be a mad dash to get to that room, kill the evil wizard, and get the treasure. The red superhero is the closest, but we'll have to pass through another chamber to get there. The blue hero also died recently, which is why he is back at start. Even though the hero is weaker, he has nothing to lose at this point, so he will try for it as well. So the superhero does get there first. He needs to roll an 11, misses, gets wounded, loses a turn, and retreats 1 space. Now that the superhero is out of the chamber, the hero swoops in and gives it a try. He needs a 12. Pretty tough, especially since he has no magic sword. He misses, but also the evil wizard misses. The superhero lost his turn, and the wizard character can move, but can't stop in the chamber because the hero is already in there. So the wizard has to move off to the side to bide his time. The next time the hero gets to attack the evil wizard, he gets lucky and rolls a 12, defeating him. The hero now collects all of the dropped treasure. The inventory shows that he has 30,000 gold, which is more than enough to win the game. Eventually, the hero gets back to level 1, returns to start, and wins the game. As a side note, it looks to me that most of this game was coded in BASIC. You can catalog the disk and see that there are a couple of AppleSoft files. You can load each of them and list them out to view the code. So what's my verdict? If I'm with a group of people, I'd prefer the board game. It's nice to see the overall game board and to use the tactile cards and pieces which are illustrated nicely. That's not to say I don't like what TSR did with the computer game. It's a nice conversion of the game, and if I'm on my Apple II and want the computer to keep track of the monsters, treasures, and tokens, I'd give it a go. Also, if your board game is packed away, you can fire this up on your computer or emulator and have some fun with it. Speaking of emulation, if you want to give the computer version a try, head on over to the Internet Archive. I'll have a link in the description. You can play this right in your web browser. Hope you enjoy it. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.